A racist gang, confident in their rule of violence and intimidation, crosses a line when they kidnap the wife of a black rancher. Little do they know they've awakened their worst nightmare. This woman isn't a victim, she's the ghost, a legendary sharpshooter who strikes fear into every enemy she encounters. Where are you tuning in from? Leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more gripping stories like this. The morning sun crept over the Montana mountains, casting a golden glow across Silver Creek Ranch. Naomi Carter walked slowly through the dewy fields, her boots making faint impressions on the wet grass. On the surface, she looked like any other ranch wife, hair tied neatly, her gaze calm and collected. But beneath the serene exterior lay a constant readiness, her sharp eyes scanning every detail of her surroundings. From the main house, Ethan Carter, her husband, leaned against the doorframe, cradling a steaming cup of coffee. "They were here again this morning," he said, his eyes drifting toward the main road, where tire tracks from motorcycles left trails of dust. Naomi looked up. "Third time this week," she replied, her voice calm, but carrying an undertone of icy resolve. Silver Creek Ranch, with its sprawling green pastures and meticulously maintained barns, had been in the Carter family for 3 generations. But now, it had caught the attention of the Devil's Mayhem MC, a notorious motorcycle gang led by Travis "Viper" Monroe. These weren't just street thugs. They were a critical link in a larger smuggling network stretching from the Canadian border down to the south. Naomi stepped off the field and into the kitchen, where Ethan was scrolling through the news on an old tablet. "Them again?" Ethan asked, his tone tinged with weariness. "We could consider selling, Naomi. The price they're offering is good, really good." Naomi didn't answer immediately. She poured herself a cup of coffee, her movements deliberate and steady. After a moment of silence, she said, "Selling isn't the solution, Ethan. This land isn't just about money. They want this location for something else." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What do you think they'll do? Burn the ranch? Or just keep threatening us?" "We're not the only ones being pushed, Naomi. The neighbors are either selling or seriously considering it." Naomi let out a small, humorless laugh. "The question isn't what they'll do to us. The question is who they really are. Look closer, Ethan. This isn't just a gang of rogue bikers." Naomi wasn't guessing. Her background as a former operative gave her a sharp eye for the unusual. She had quickly noticed patterns in Devil's Mayhem's movements. They operated with discipline, using professional tactics to monitor ranchers' routes and habits. Details like the strategic placement of their motorcycles, their coordinated surveillance, and their brazen confidence all pointed to a well-trained organization, not common criminals. Hours later, as Naomi tended to the livestock, the rumble of motorcycle engines broke the stillness. She looked up, her eyes locking on the road leading to the ranch. 3 large motorcycles pulled up at the gate. Travis "Viper" Monroe, a tall man with long hair tied back, and eyes as sharp as knives, dismounted, a cold smile etched across his sun-weathered face. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," Monroe said, his voice dripping with smugness. "We just wanted to stop by and discuss a little business. I think you and your husband will find our terms reasonable." Naomi stood tall, wiping her hands on a cloth tied at her waist, but never breaking eye contact. "Good morning, Mr. Monroe," she replied, her voice steady. "This is private property. If you want to negotiate, speak to my husband." Monroe smirked, signaling to 2 of his men to step closer. "I think you should reconsider. We're not known for our patience, and I'm sure you wouldn't want things to get complicated." One of his men, cocky and dismissive, sneered. "Mrs. Carter, don't make this hard on yourself. You're just a woman and—" His words trailed off with a pointed glance at her skin tone, the implication unmistakable. Naomi said nothing, but her eyes glinted with a cold fury. Turning on her heel, she walked back into the house, leaving the men standing in the yard. Inside, Ethan watched from the window, his face etched with worry. "Naomi, what are you doing? These aren't people you can deal with." Naomi stopped, turning to face him, her expression steeled with determination. "They think I'm just a ranch wife, an easy target, but they're about to learn something." Ethan frowned, confused. "Learn what?" Naomi stepped closer, her voice low and firm. "That I've never been an easy target." Naomi knew that dealing with Devil's Mayhem would escalate beyond mere threats, but she also knew she wasn't just a ranch wife anymore. The peaceful facade of her life was cracking, and the ghost was beginning to emerge, ready to hunt down the fools who had dared to cross her. The wooden door closed behind Naomi, leaving the tense atmosphere of the ranch's courtyard outside. Through a slit in the curtain, she watched Travis Monroe and his two henchmen. Their movements, the way one adjusted his helmet, while the other casually touched the pocket, likely hiding a gun, spoke volumes. These weren't mere street thugs. They moved like a trained, organized unit, accustomed to applying pressure. "Naomi, we can't keep this up," Ethan said, his face etched with worry. "If they want the ranch, maybe we should sell. I don't want things to get out of hand." Naomi turned to her husband, her gaze softening but her voice remaining firm. "Ethan, this isn't just about selling land. Can't you see? They're not here to negotiate. They're here to take no matter what we say." She locked eyes with him. "They won't stop, even if we sell." Outside, Travis Monroe signaled his men to stay put as he stepped onto the porch. Knocking 3 times, he spoke in a voice that was calm yet menacing. "Mrs. Carter, I know you're listening. We just want to talk. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Naomi opened the door, her faint smile betraying no more than a carefully feigned nervousness. "Mr. Monroe, I've already told you. This is private property. We're not interested in selling." Monroe's lips curled into a smirk, a look Naomi recognized all too well from past encounters. It was the smirk of someone who believed they were always in control. "I think you misunderstand the situation. Selling or not isn't really your decision to make." Naomi kept up her vulnerable act, letting him keep talking. "This is your best opportunity, Mrs. Carter. $2 million, right here, right now. A generous offer no one could refuse." He paused, his cold eyes drilling into hers. "But if you choose the hard way, well, that's fine by us too." Taking a steadying breath, Naomi clenched the edge of her dress as though frightened. "Are you threatening us?" she asked, her voice trembling, perfectly slipping into the role of a frightened wife. Monroe chuckled, glancing at one of his men. "A threat? No, Mrs. Carter. We're just offering options. If you're smart, you'll pick the easier one." One of the henchmen chimed in with a sneer. "Just sign the papers. It's not that hard. A woman like you, what's the point of staying here? Go somewhere more fitting for you." His eyes swept over her with a disdainful look. Outwardly, Naomi allowed a flicker of panic to surface. Inside, her mind was analyzing. Travis Monroe was a calculated leader, but his overconfidence was a weakness. His 2 henchmen, though intimidating, showed cracks. One kept fidgeting with his pocket, betraying his dependence on his weapon. The other stayed near the motorcycles, a clear indication of his readiness to retreat if things turned south. Her eyes caught the emblem on their leather jackets, a skull with red wings, the unmistakable insignia of Devil's Mayhem MC. This wasn't a small-town biker gang. They were part of a larger, possibly international smuggling network. Naomi decided to play her own game. "All right," she said, her voice quivering as she looked down. "I'll talk to my husband, but I need time." Monroe stepped back, a victorious grin spreading across his face. "3 days, Mrs. Carter. After that, if there's no signed agreement, we'll have to reconsider our methods of persuasion." He turned to leave, throwing out one last line over his shoulder. "You know where to find me." As the bikers rode off, Naomi shut the door, her expression hardening, the facade of fear gone. Ethan, who had been watching from the window, quickly spoke up. "Naomi, what are you doing? These people aren't the kind you can handle. We should sell before things escalate." Naomi turned, her eyes sharp as steel. "Ethan, do you really think selling will solve this? This isn't a simple land deal. They don't want this ranch just because it's in a prime location. They need it for something bigger." Ethan frowned. "Something bigger? They're just a biker gang, Naomi. Don't let your suspicions make us lose a good offer." Naomi stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Don't you think it's strange? These aren't ordinary thugs. They're organized, trained. Their actions, the way they've been watching us, the way they talk, it's all calculated. This isn't just about forcing a sale. This is the tip of something much larger." Ethan looked at her, torn between fear and trust. "Naomi, if you're right, this is more dangerous than I thought. What can we do?" Naomi met his gaze, her determination unyielding. "We don't sell, and I'm going to find out the truth. But I need you to stand with me." Ethan sighed but nodded. "I'll stand by you. But promise me, Naomi, if things get out of control, we'll find another way." Naomi smiled softly. "Thank you, but I won't let it get to that point." The glow of the motorcycle headlights disappeared into the night, leaving Silver Creek Ranch in an eerie quiet. Naomi knew this was just the beginning. Travis Monroe had made a critical mistake in underestimating her, a woman who had once been the ghost. What he thought would be an easy conquest was about to become a nightmare he'd never forget. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Naomi sat in the small room at the back of the house, the dim light from her laptop screen reflecting on her face. Ever since leaving her role as a federal agent, she had maintained a basic surveillance system, partly to protect the ranch, partly because her instincts never truly slept. And now, that system was becoming her most essential tool. She opened the footage from hidden cameras strategically placed around the ranch. The Devil's Mayhem thought they were being discreet by monitoring her family. But Naomi had been tracking their movements. 2 motorcycles repeatedly passed by the main road, sometimes stopping at a safe distance, other times circling the bordering areas. Naomi quickly typed on her keyboard, accessing public databases she knew how to exploit from her years as an agent. She entered the license plates captured by the cameras. A result popped up. Those vehicles were registered to individuals linked to Devil's Mayhem MC. She wasn't surprised, but the connections that followed made her frown. In the days that followed, Naomi began gathering information cautiously. She took casual walks around the areas near the ranch, carrying an old camera, pretending to take landscape photos. In reality, each click of the shutter captured small details: license plates, faces, and signs only someone with her training would notice. boot prints and military patterns along the trails, optimal vantage points the bikers used to surveil the area. Naomi also noticed that Devil's Mayhem wasn't just threatening her ranch. They had taken over other properties along Canyon Road, a strategic route stretching to the Canadian border. It was the perfect corridor for smuggling illicit goods undetected: guns, drugs, or even sensitive technology. The map Naomi created from the collected data revealed a troubling plan. Devil's Mayhem was gradually gaining control of the entire region, and her Silver Creek Ranch was the final piece in a chain of land along the route. As the picture became clearer, Naomi felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, the kind she used to feel when unraveling complex conspiracies in her past life. That afternoon, Naomi sat on the porch rocking chair, her eyes fixed on the horizon, though her mind was racing. Ethan stepped out, holding a mug of hot coffee, his eyes full of concern. "What's on your mind?" he asked. Naomi turned to him, handing over the carefully annotated map. "Look, Ethan, this isn't just about our ranch. It's a bigger plan. They're building a smuggling network across the border, and they need Silver Creek to complete it." Ethan frowned as he studied the map. "So, you're saying this isn't just some biker gang?" Naomi nodded, her voice lowering. "Exactly. Devil's Mayhem is just a tool. Behind them is a bigger force, an organization I've faced before: the Council." At the mention of the Council, Naomi felt a familiar chill run down her spine. 10 years ago, she had come close to dismantling the organization. They weren't just a criminal group. They were a shadow network of power, controlling everything from arms trafficking and drug smuggling to international intelligence. The Council manipulated political and economic systems, and they were the reason she had to abandon her career, leaving the life of an agent behind to become a ranch wife. Naomi remembered the first time she encountered the name of the organization during an investigation into military tech smuggling. All evidence led to the Council, but as she got closer to the truth, her colleagues were systematically removed. Those who survived were framed or forced into silence. Naomi narrowly escaped their assassination attempt thanks to her instincts and quick thinking. Looking at Ethan, her voice grew heavier. "The Council destroyed my career, Ethan, and now they're back, right here, at our ranch." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression shifting from worry to determination. "So, what do we do?" Naomi looked toward the horizon, where the sun was setting behind distant mountains. "We need to piece together the whole picture. If the Council is really behind this, Devil's Mayhem is just a pawn. I'll find a way to take down the entire board." As darkness fell, Naomi returned to her desk, preparing for what was to come. She knew she couldn't confront the Council directly, but she also knew that if she played her cards right, she could dismantle their network from within. She checked her surveillance system, loaded the old gun that had been her companion during her days as an agent. This time, Naomi wasn't just protecting the ranch. She was gearing up for a fight she'd been waiting for over a decade. The Council had made a mistake by letting her live. Now they would have to face the ghost once again. Darkness blanketed Silver Creek Ranch, leaving only the faint glow from Naomi Carter's study. The computer before her displayed carefully spliced surveillance footage, evidence she knew would become a crucial weapon in her battle against Devil's Mayhem. Her mind raced, analyzing every detail, every move the enemy might make. She quickly typed a message on an encrypted channel, addressed to someone she hadn't contacted in years: Marshall Kane. If anyone understood the Council and its workings, It was Kane, a seasoned federal agent who had stood beside her during their most perilous missions. The message was simple yet weighty. Kane, I need you. Their network is active again. Devil's Mayhem is just the surface. Meet me at Silver Creek. Leaning back in her chair, Naomi watched the faint glimmer of motorcycle headlights weaving through the distance along Canyon Road. The battle had begun. This time, she wasn't just the hunted. She was ready to fight back. The next day, Naomi fortified the surveillance system around the ranch. Cameras were better concealed, their coverage expanded to monitor the border areas. She also repurposed old but reliable equipment to create a custom alarm system connected directly to her phone. As she rummaged through the barn for the outdated devices, Ethan appeared, leaning against the doorway, his eyes heavy with concern. Naomi, what are we even doing here? Do you really think you can take on an entire gang? Naomi turned, her gaze sharp as a blade. This isn't just a gang, Ethan. This is the first step in the Council's return. If we back down, they won't stop, and I can't let that happen. Ethan didn't respond immediately, but his worried eyes betrayed his thoughts. What if you're wrong? He asked, his voice low. What if all of this just makes them more dangerous? Naomi stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. If I'm wrong, we lose a ranch. But if I'm right, we're protecting this land and countless other families from them. Do you trust me? Ethan was silent for a moment before nodding. I always trust you. Just be careful, Naomi. That night, Naomi's surveillance system alerted her to activity. On the screen, 3 members of Devil's Mayhem crept across the dark fields toward the livestock barn. One of them carried a gasoline can, clearly intent on arson. Naomi didn't trigger the alarm immediately. She needed more evidence. She adjusted the cameras to capture every movement. The flicker of a lighter reflected on the leader's face. A tall, lanky man with wild blonde hair. Flames roared to life, quickly consuming part of the barn and sending thick smoke spiraling into the sky. Naomi remained calm. She activated the emergency sprinkler system she had prepared earlier. Water cascaded down, extinguishing the fire before it could spread. Simultaneously, she called the local police, reporting the arson and providing clear video evidence. From her monitor, she saw the gang members panic as the flames died. One of them yelled, "Fall back, we'll be back." They scrambled onto their bikes and disappeared into the night, but Naomi knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, Ethan stared at the scorched remains of the barn, his face tense. They burned down our barn, Naomi. We can't take these people on alone. The police won't protect us forever. Naomi's voice was steady, unshaken. Ethan, do you think they'll stop here? This was just a warning. If they don't get this land, they'll find other ways to apply pressure. And if we sell, they'll do the same to someone else. We have to stand our ground, not retreat. Ethan shook his head, hands on his hips. I'm just worried about you, about us. This isn't a fight we need to be in. Naomi stepped closer, her eyes resolute. Ethan, if we don't stand up, who will? I'm not just protecting this ranch. I'm standing up for people like us, people who have no voice, and I won't let them win. Ethan sighed deeply, but didn't argue further. He knew Naomi had made up her mind, and once she did, nothing could change it. Later that afternoon, as the golden-orange sunlight bathed the ranch, an old pickup truck pulled up to the gate. A tall man with a rugged beard and sharp eyes stepped out. Naomi walked out to meet him, a faint smile on her lips. "Kane," she said, her voice low. "Thanks for coming." Marshal Kane nodded, his eyes scanning the charred remains of the barn. I heard you were in trouble. Devil's Mayhem, right? Naomi nodded. And more than that. This is just the surface. The council is making its move. We need to act before it's too late. Kane smirked faintly, a smile tinged with understanding. Then, let's get started. Naomi turned and led Kane inside. She knew this wasn't going to be an easy fight, but with a trusted ally by her side, the counteroffensive had truly begun. The room in the Silver Creek Ranch was dimly lit by the soft glow of a desk lamp. Naomi and Marshal Kane stood around the desk, analyzing a map and the information Naomi had gathered. On the map, the smuggling routes along Canyon Road stood out like a spider web, with Silver Creek Ranch marking the final link in the chain. Kane pointed to a symbol on the map. That's the Devil's Mayhem warehouse, he said, his voice thoughtful. It's just outside of town. I've heard it's not just their operations hub, but also where they stage shipments before crossing the border. Naomi nodded. And we need to know exactly what they're moving, not just to shut them down, but to expose the council. The only way to do that is from the inside. Kane looked at Naomi, his expression serious. What are you thinking? Naomi met his gaze, her eyes sharp. They want me. I'll let them take me. But this will be my trap, not theirs. 2 days later, Naomi stood alone in a field behind the ranch, a spot she knew Devil's Mayhem could easily monitor. She pretended to inspect the fencing, maintaining a facade of calm obliviousness, while Kane watched from a distance via surveillance systems. It didn't take long. The familiar growl of motorcycle engines echoed in the distance. 3 bikes roared into view, coming to a stop as a group of men dismounted, led by Travis Monroe. His eyes gleamed with the predatory satisfaction of a hunter closing in on his prey. We warned you, Mrs. Carter, Monroe said, a cold smile curling on his lips. You had your chance to do this the easy way. Now we'll do it my way. Naomi didn't resist as they closed in, binding her hands and pushing her onto one of the bikes. She allowed herself to be taken, her expression icy and calm, like still water. This was the first move in her plan, to make them think they had won. They took Naomi to a large warehouse deep in the forest, far from town. It was no ordinary warehouse. The windows were blacked out, security cameras covered every angle, and armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Naomi quickly realized this wasn't just Devil's Mayhem's hideout. It was a critical hub in the council's network. They tied her to a chair in a dimly lit room, a single dangling light bulb casting weak illumination. Monroe entered, leaning down to scrutinize her. You're remarkably calm for someone who's just been captured. I have to admit, I admire your nerve. Naomi smirked, a smile that unsettled Monroe. Nerve isn't the only thing I have, she replied coolly. After Monroe left, Naomi began assessing her situation. During the hours of her captivity, she listened and observed. The guards' chatter revealed scattered but valuable clues. One of them mentioned a state-of-the-art shipment and a major transport scheduled in 2 days. Naomi started exploiting the weakest links. A young, inexperienced recruit was easy to manipulate. Using a mix of soft tones and pointed questions, Naomi coaxed more details about their transport routes and connections to the larger organization. She memorized everything, from the shipment schedule to descriptions of the cargo. As night fell, Naomi was moved to another room, where she finally glimpsed the cargo they were guarding. Large crates were stacked neatly, marked with warning symbols and QR codes. Her trained eye instantly recognized the contents as high-tech equipment, possibly military-grade technology or automated weaponry. A careless slip of conversation between two guards confirmed her suspicions. "I heard this stuff's coming from the east," one muttered. "Costs a fortune, but the buyers don't care. Once it's across the border, it's not our problem." Naomi scanned the markings on the crates, her stomach tightening. These weren't ordinary goods. This was cutting-edge technology, the kind the Council was likely using to expand its international power. She knew she had to escape and deliver this intelligence to Kane to devise their next move. Sitting back in her temporary cell, Naomi allowed herself a small smile. Devil's Mayhem thought they had captured her, but in reality she had lured them into her game. Now, she not only had a detailed understanding of their network, but also a clear view of the Council's true objectives. The darkness of the warehouse didn't bother Naomi. On the contrary, it exhilarated her. The real battle was just beginning, and this time Naomi, better known as the Ghost, was ready to hunt. In the dim corner of the holding cell, Naomi quietly activated the compact tracking device hidden in her sleeve. The signal was sent. Now, all she could do was wait for Marshal Kane and his team to arrive. She glanced at the clock on the wall, calculating the time. A battle was imminent, and she knew she had to be ready. A few miles away, in the shadows of a forest near the warehouse, Marshal Kane and his special operations team were inspecting their weapons and reviewing strategies. They had received Naomi's signal, an exact location and schematic she had secretly recorded through the surveillance system. Kane double-checked the map, marking the entry points and guard posts Naomi had described. "We need to move fast and clean," Kane commanded, his voice low and resolute. "Naomi's in there, but she's no damsel in distress. She'll hold her own until we're in." Under the pale moonlight, the team split into two groups, silently approaching the warehouse from the main and secondary entrances. As they drew closer, Kane signaled, and a deafening explosion from a flash grenade shook the building. The blinding light and ear-splitting noise threw the Devil's Mayhem gang into chaos. Inside the warehouse, Naomi heard the explosion and a faint smile crossed her lips. Kane was here. Taking advantage of the commotion, she swiftly used a small blade hidden in her boot to cut the ropes binding her. She moved quickly through the corridors, avoiding the panicked members of Devil's Mayhem. Meanwhile, the gunfight between Kane's team and the gang escalated. The seasoned guards of Devil's Mayhem fought back fiercely, but Kane's team, highly trained and efficient, soon gained the upper hand. Naomi made her way to the warehouse's central area, where she spotted Travis Monroe commanding his men. He noticed her and drew his gun. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice cold with a hint of surprise, "I must admit, you're the gutsiest woman I've ever encountered." Naomi smirked. "And you're the dumbest for thinking you could control this." Monroe fired, but Naomi was ready. She rolled to dodge, grabbing a gun from a fallen thug nearby and firing back. Amid the chaos, Kane emerged from behind, his rifle trained directly on Monroe. "This ends here, Monroe," Kane declared. Monroe sneered, his eyes glinting with defiance. "You have no idea who you're up against. The Council won't let this slide." His final words seemed like a signal. He lunged at Kane, but Naomi acted swiftly. A precise shot from her gun brought Monroe to the ground. Kane moved in, cuffing him while the team continued to secure the remaining gang members. With the warehouse under control, Naomi quickly returned to the storage area she had noticed earlier. She opened one of the large crates, revealing state-of-the-art electronic components clearly intended for military use. More crucially, she found a small safe beneath the crates. Kane approached as Naomi unlocked it, revealing a stack of sealed documents. She opened them, and the words inside made her freeze momentarily. "This is a list of officials connected to the council," Naomi said, her voice laced with shock and anger. "They're orchestrating a massive network of corruption, not just in Montana, but nationwide." Kane took the documents, his expression sharpening. "We've just uncovered their most critical link." Naomi nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. "But this fight isn't over. The council won't stop, and neither will we." As dawn broke, Naomi and Kane emerged from the warehouse, the headlights of the special ops vehicles illuminating the area. Monroe and the surviving gang members were taken into custody, but Naomi knew this was only the beginning. The cargo in the warehouse, the list of corrupt officials, these were just pieces of a much larger puzzle. Naomi gazed toward the horizon, where the first light of dawn painted the sky. The real battle against the council lay ahead, and she was ready to face it, with Kane and his team by her side. The dawn light illuminated the warehouse area, but Naomi's mind was far from at ease. The documents retrieved from the safe were spread across the makeshift command center where she and Kane worked. Names, transportation routes, and signatures painted a chilling picture of the complexity and influence of the council. Kane skimmed through a document, his eyes narrowing with intensity. "Naomi, look at this. This list doesn't just include corrupt officials. It outlines international contracts. They're not just operating in Montana. This is a network spanning from here to the Canadian border and beyond, controlling the smuggling of weapons and high-tech equipment." Naomi nodded, her gaze sharp. Devil's Mayhem is just a pawn. These ringleaders think they hold the power, but they're merely tools enabling the council to operate a global smuggling empire. Kane pointed to a section detailing shipments of high-tech components. "These are military-grade parts, but it's not just weapons. Look at this code." He tapped on a string of complex characters. "This is a quantum cryptography identifier. This technology isn't just military. It can compromise security systems worldwide." Naomi exhaled deeply and leaned back in her chair. The council isn't just smuggling. They're building a system of control by stealing and selling sensitive technology. If they succeed, they won't just manipulate governments. They'll dominate global intelligence networks. Kane was silent, his expression grim. "We can't let this go on. But to dismantle this network, we'll need more than what we have now." Later that afternoon, Kane sat at his computer, utilizing an encrypted communication system. He transmitted the collected documents to trusted international allies, intelligence organizations like the CIA, MI6, DGSE, and others. Alongside the sensitive data, he included a stark warning. The council has operated in the shadows for too long, and it's time for them to be stopped. Naomi stood by the window, watching as tactical vehicles pulled away. "Kane, do you think they'll respond?" Kane turned, his voice steady and resolute. "If they understand the gravity of what we've uncovered, they'll have no choice but to act. But Naomi, this operation won't just stay in Montana. It will extend to places we've never even considered." Naomi met Kane's eyes, her expression unwavering. "That's why I have to be part of it. I've been pursuing the council for a decade. I'm not stepping aside when the final battle is within reach." Kane frowned, his concern evident. "Naomi, This isn't just your fight anymore. You've done enough." She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Kane, because it's not just my fight, I can't walk away. If people like you and me don't stand against them, who will?" Kane sighed, realizing he couldn't dissuade her. "All right, but if you're in, you have to promise we'll do this the right way, with a plan and no unnecessary risks." Naomi nodded firmly. "I promise." In the days that followed, Naomi and Kane worked tirelessly. They drafted strategies, gathered intelligence, and monitored responses from international intelligence agencies. The good news came sooner than expected. A global alliance began to take shape, ready to cooperate in dismantling the Council. Naomi spent her evenings inspecting her gear and weapons. She knew the upcoming operation would be anything but easy. The Council was a formidable and far-reaching adversary. Yet she also knew that every step she took was meticulously prepared. Before nightfall, Kane entered the room with a new dossier. "Naomi, we've located their main base. It's on the outskirts of a major city near the border. If we want to strike at the heart, this is our target." Naomi studied the map, determination lighting her eyes. "This is where their game ends." As darkness enveloped the horizon, Naomi stood on the porch, staring out over the sprawling fields. She felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, tempered by the calm resolve of someone ready to face whatever lay ahead. Kane joined her, standing silently for a moment. "Do you think we'll pull this off?" Naomi turned to him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "We won't just pull it off, Kane. We have to." And with that, they stepped into the night, where the decisive battle awaited. A fight Naomi knew she was prepared to see through to the very end. In the dim light of the night, the task force convoy silently approached the area surrounding the Council's operations center. A once-abandoned industrial site on the city's outskirts had been transformed into a secret fortress, secured with state-of-the-art technology. Naomi and Kane stood at the command point, reviewing the plan one final time. "This isn't just a base," Kane said, his expression grave. "This is the operational hub of the entire network. If we fail, they'll relocate everything within hours." Naomi nodded, her eyes sharp as a blade. "We won't fail. This is our one shot to bring them down." She glanced at the task force, a group of hardened individuals prepared to risk it all. Each member understood the stakes, yet their faces reflected unwavering determination. Naomi thought to herself, "Tonight, we fight not just for justice, but to dismantle the darkness that's loomed for far too long." As the clock struck the designated time, Kane gave the command, "Move out." The deafening boom of stun grenades shattered the silence, rocking the air. The main steel gate was obliterated, clearing the way for the task force to storm inside. But the moment they entered, gunfire erupted from within. The Council's guards, expertly trained and heavily armed, launched an immediate counterattack. Naomi led a smaller team through a side route, utilizing secret passages she had memorized from stolen blueprints. Moving like a shadow, she neutralized guards with swift precision, leaving no trace of her presence. Up ahead, Kane and the main force engaged in a fierce firefight with the defenders. The industrial zone transformed into a brutal battlefield, the cacophony of gunfire and shouted commands echoing in every direction. While Kane's team pushed deeper into the heart of the base, Naomi reached the control room. The heavy doors to the command center swung open, revealing a high-tech space filled with monitors displaying transport routes and live operations. Standing in the center of the room was Marcus Draven, a tall man with a chillingly cold demeanor. His eyes gleamed when he spotted Naomi. "Ah, Ghost, we meet again. I must admit I'm surprised you're still alive." Naomi stepped forward, her weapon steady in her hands. "And I'm not surprised to find you still profiting off manipulation and destruction. But tonight, it ends." Draven smirked arrogantly. "You think you can stop the Council? We're an empire. No one can take us down." Naomi didn't respond. Instead, she fired a shot at the central computer system, plunging the screens into darkness. "Your empire is already crumbling, Marcus. You've lost." Draven lunged at Naomi, initiating an intense hand-to-hand fight. He wasn't just a commander, he was a lethal combatant, trained to kill. But Naomi was ready. Drawing on years of field experience and training, she matched his every move. Finally, Naomi overpowered Draven, pinning him to the ground at gunpoint. "Talk, Marcus," she demanded, her voice icy. "The whole truth. Who's behind the Council? How does your network operate?" Draven sneered, but his confidence wavered as he noticed the small recording device in Naomi's hand. "You think I'll talk? Even if I do, you'll never reach them. The Council isn't a few individuals, it's an entire system." Naomi pressed the barrel of her gun to his temple. "Maybe, but to dismantle a system, all we need is to understand how it works. Now, start talking." Under pressure, Draven finally relented, divulging critical information: how the Council controlled criminal syndicates like Devil's Mayhem, bribed officials, manipulated politics, and trafficked sensitive technology on a global scale. Naomi recorded every word, knowing this evidence was key to dismantling the Council. As Draven was escorted away, he cast her a final, venomous glare. "You don't know what you've started, Ghost. They'll come for you. They never forget." Unshaken, Naomi replied in a calm, steely voice, "Let them try." Outside, Kane waited as Naomi emerged from the center. The area was now under task force control, and all the base's data had been secured. "We've got enough to expose them," Kane said, relief in his voice. "But this won't be easy. The fight isn't over." Naomi gazed into the distance where the city lights flickered on the horizon. "The fight is never over, Kane. But tonight, we've done what they thought no one dared to do. We've faced them, and we've made them afraid." She climbed into the vehicle, her eyes filled with resolve. This was only the beginning, but with the evidence in hand, Naomi had struck a decisive blow against a seemingly invincible criminal empire. In the secure briefing room of a federal agency, Kane stood before a large screen displaying a world map. Red dots lit up across various nations, marking locations where the Council had established its network. His deep, commanding voice resonated through the stillness. "This is the moment for a full-scale counterattack. With the evidence Naomi brought back, we have a unique opportunity to dismantle the Council's entire network. Our international allies are ready, but precision is critical. We cannot leave a single link intact." Naomi stood beside him, observing the tense faces of agents and leaders. "We've shown them they can't hide forever," she said, her gaze sharp, "but the next step will determine everything. We must act swiftly, decisively, and leave them no chance to rebuild." The operation, codenamed Shadowfall, was launched worldwide. International task forces, CIA, MI6, Interpol, simultaneously raided the Council's facilities across numerous countries. Secret bases, offshore bank accounts, and smuggling networks were exposed within hours. Global media outlets quickly picked up the story. Headlines like, The Shadow Empire falls and the Council exposed dominated news cycles. High-ranking members of the Council, once puppet masters operating behind the scenes, were captured or forced into hiding. Some resisted, but were swiftly neutralized by the coordinated precision of special forces. Naomi and Kane monitored the operation from the command center. Each successful report brought a sense of relief to the room. Yet Naomi maintained her calm demeanor. She knew an organization like the Council wouldn't crumble entirely so easily. Some operatives had undoubtedly escaped, and assets remained unaccounted for. "They'll try to rebuild if we're not vigilant," she reminded Kane. He nodded. "True, but today we've shattered their core. They won't recover easily." Following the campaign's success, Naomi was invited to a press conference in Washington, D.C., where the Shadowfall victory was formally announced. Dressed in simple yet dignified attire, she stepped up to the podium before hundreds of reporters and cameras. Naomi began by recounting her long and arduous journey, from her days as a federal agent to her decision to take on the Council. But the room fell silent when she spoke of the comrades who had sacrificed their lives to thwart the Council's schemes. Names like John Parker, Emily Rivera, and dozens of others gave their lives not just for duty, but because they believed in justice, believed in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. They cannot stand here today, but I want the world to remember them and the quiet sacrifices they made. Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with resolve. This victory is not just for us, it is for them. Let us ensure their sacrifice was not in vain. Let us ensure that no organization like the Council rises again. Her words left the room in a poignant silence before applause erupted like thunder. Many in the audience, including agents and officials, couldn't hold back their emotions. After the press conference, Naomi returned to her hotel room and sat quietly by the window, gazing at the city lights. The faces of her fallen comrades filled her mind. Smiling faces, moments of camaraderie, and the battles they had fought together. Kane entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in front of Naomi before sitting across from her. "They would be proud of you, Naomi. What you did today brought justice for them." Naomi gave a faint smile, a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "Kane, justice won't bring them back, but if this makes the world a little better, then it was worth it." Kane looked at her with deep respect. "You did what no one else dared to do, and we're just getting started." Naomi gazed out into the distance where the city lights shimmered like stars. "Yes, this is only the beginning, but with this step, we've shown them that no darkness can remain hidden forever." The Shadowfall campaign was more than a tactical victory. It became a symbol of faith in justice. Naomi knew her journey wasn't over, but for the first time in years she felt a glimmer of hope. Though the Council had been struck down, she would remain vigilant, understanding that darkness always sought an opportunity to return. With her eyes set on the future, Naomi prepared to move forward, not just as the ghost she once was, but as a beacon of inspiration, bringing hope to those who dared to face the shadows. In the months following Operation Shadowfall, the aftermath of the Council's collapse rippled across the globe. International law enforcement and intelligence agencies worked tirelessly to ensure that the intricate criminal network could never rise again. Daily news. Broadcasts were filled with stories of arrests, exposing corrupt officials and key figures within the organization. From her Silver Creek ranch in Montana, Naomi watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. She knew that every person brought to justice was another step closer to true accountability. The documents Naomi had gathered became the cornerstone for massive investigations. Several of the council's major smuggling routes were dismantled, offshore bank accounts were frozen, and the organization's primary sources of funding dried up. The once untouchable leaders now faced the harsh reality of justice. In an international courtroom, Marcus Draven stood before a panel of judges, his face etched with defiance, but betraying a hint of helplessness. He faced charges not only for arms trafficking, but also for orchestrating political destabilization. While he admitted to his crimes, he delivered a chilling parting threat. "There will always be darkness in this world," Draven declared. "Even if you extinguish this flame, another will rise." From the observer's gallery, Naomi maintained a calm gaze. She knew he was right. Darkness would always exist. But she also knew there would always be people like her and Cain, ready to fight to keep the light alive. As the council was dismantled, Naomi's reputation began to spread. Media outlets worldwide hailed her not only as a legendary agent, but as a symbol of courage. Her story, a woman refusing to bow to injustice and willing to fight for what was right, inspired countless others. At an honorary event, Naomi stood on stage to receive a medal from a high-ranking government official. "Naomi Carter," the official said proudly, "you're not just a wife, a citizen, or an agent. You're a symbol of justice, of resilience in the face of adversity. Thanks to you, thousands of people around the world have regained their faith in justice." Naomi offered a brief, heartfelt thanks, but inside her emotions surged. This wasn't her victory alone. It was the triumph of everyone who had stood against the darkness. As the event concluded, Naomi walked out into the golden glow of twilight. She had never sought fame or glory. What she desired most was to return to Silver Creek Ranch, where she could find peace in the days to come. Cain met her in the hallway, holding a cup of coffee. "This is for the hero of the day," he said with a smile. Naomi smiled softly, accepting the cup. "Cain, we both know this wouldn't have been possible without you and the others." Cain nodded, his tone serious. "Maybe, but none of us could have done this without you leading the way. The ghost wasn't just an agent. You were the flame that burned down an entire empire of darkness." Back at the ranch, Naomi stood on the porch, gazing out at the vast fields. She knew the fight against darkness was never truly over. But now, she could rest knowing she had played a vital part in that battle. Ethan joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've done well, Naomi. Now it's time to rest." Naomi smiled, looking at her husband. "Maybe so. But you know, Ethan, if the darkness ever returns, I'll stand up again." She looked up at the sky, where the moonlight shone brightly, a reminder that light persists, even in the darkest moments. Naomi Carter, the ghost, had fulfilled her mission. But deep down, she remained ready, should justice ever call upon her again. The evening sun at Silver Creek Ranch cast a golden glow across the sprawling fields of grass. Naomi stepped out of the log cabin, inhaling the crisp, refreshing air unique to Montana. The sounds from the horse stables and the distant calls of birds overhead brought her a rare sense of tranquility. It had been a long time since she felt life fall into such a gentle rhythm. At the far end of the yard, Ethan was repairing a wooden fence damaged by the storm. When he noticed Naomi approaching, he looked up and offered her his familiar smile. "You don't have to help," he said. "I've got this." Naomi smiled back. You know, I've faced an entire international crime network. A little fence isn't going to intimidate me. Ethan chuckled, his eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and admiration. That's right, Naomi Carter. You're no longer the woman they underestimated. The days at Silver Creek Ranch now gave Naomi the peaceful life she had longed for. She spent her time caring for the horses, inspecting fences, and sharing simple conversations with Ethan about everyday matters. To her, every small task on the ranch carried immense significance, symbols of the freedom and the life she had fought so hard to reclaim. However, Naomi couldn't completely leave behind the life she once lived. Each time she passed through the ranch gates, memories of her days as the ghost resurfaced, the fierce battles, the comrades she had lost. Yet, instead of allowing the past to haunt her, Naomi chose to let it fuel her resolve. Not long after her return, Naomi received a special invitation from the government. A group of young agents, fresh to the field, wanted to learn from her. Initially, Naomi hesitated. She wasn't sure if she wanted to immerse herself in that world again. But after a few conversations with Kane, she realized she still had something valuable to give. They need a guide, Kane had said over the phone, and no one does it better than you. You're not just a great mentor, Naomi. You're a symbol of resilience and justice. Naomi agreed. Every month, she spent a few days away from Silver Creek at a special training center. There, she taught not only tactics and skills, but also shared her life, experiences, how to hold on to hope in the darkest moments, how to face fear and rise above it. The young agents looked up to her with open admiration. To them, she wasn't just a teacher, but a living legend, a woman who had dared to confront and defeat one of the most dangerous organizations in the world. One evening at the training center, after finishing a lecture, Naomi sat by a campfire with a group of young agents. Lydia, a young recruit, hesitated before asking, "Miss Naomi, how did you handle the pressure of knowing you were up against an organization like the Council?" Naomi was silent for a moment, watching the flames dance before her. "Sometimes," she began, "the pressure feels unbearable. But I always reminded myself that I wasn't fighting for myself alone. I was fighting for those who couldn't protect themselves, for justice, for the people who believed in me." She glanced around, her gaze lingering on each eager, determined face. You'll have moments like that too, when everything seems to collapse. But remember, justice is never handed to us easily. We have to fight for it, defend it, and never give up. Returning to Silver Creek after each trip, Naomi brought with her a sense of joy and fulfillment from helping the next generation. But she never forgot to savor the precious moments with Ethan and the ranch she had come to cherish. Ethan once told her she had become a symbol, not just for Montana, but for the entire world. But to Naomi, that title didn't matter. What she valued most was the peace she and those around her now enjoyed, and the knowledge that she had done everything she could to protect it. She knew there would always be new shadows on the horizon, but Naomi Carter, though she had embraced a quieter life, remained ever ready, like a smoldering flame, prepared to ignite if justice ever called upon her again. Dawn at Silver Creek Ranch marked the beginning of a new day. Sunlight bathed the sprawling green fields, reflecting the peace Naomi Carter had fought so hard to preserve. Sitting on the wooden cabin porch with a cup of coffee in hand, she watched her horses grazing leisurely in the valley below. But deep in her mind, the journey she had endured was indelible. Naomi had become a symbol, not just in Montana, but worldwide, Articles, television programs, and conferences hailed her as a hero who had defeated seemingly invincible forces. Yet, what moved her most wasn't the fame, but the letters, emails, and heartfelt thanks from ordinary people. Those who had once felt overlooked, dismissed, and now found encouragement in her story. Naomi realized she was no longer the quiet woman living in obscurity. Younger generations, particularly those grappling with prejudice and hardship, saw her as a living source of inspiration. At a motivational event in New York, she stepped onto the stage before thousands of attendees. The room fell silent as Naomi took the microphone, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. I used to be someone underestimated, not just because of my appearance, skin color, or gender, but because some believed I didn't have the strength to fight back. She began, her voice warm yet commanding. But I refused to let those biases define me. Instead, I used them as fuel for my fire. Naomi paused, allowing her words to resonate with her audience. Justice isn't something you can wait for others to deliver. You have to fight for it. You have to rise, even when faced with forces that seem insurmountable. I did it. And if I can, so can you. Thunderous applause erupted, but Naomi didn't need further validation. She knew her words had reached those who needed them most, those struggling to find their own voice. Naomi wasn't just a symbol. She decided to transform her experiences into tangible actions. At the training center where she once taught, she established a special program called Shadows into Light. This initiative focused on training young people, especially those from marginalized or underrepresented communities, to become leaders, champions of justice, and protectors of righteousness. The program's classes didn't just teach tactics and survival skills. They emphasized the importance of resilience and ethics. If you don't believe in justice, you can't fight for it, Naomi reminded her students in every lecture. Kane also joined the program, helping Naomi design practical exercises and strategies. Together, they became an unstoppable duo, not just in their past battles, but in nurturing the next generation. One evening, as the sun dipped behind Montana's majestic mountains, Naomi sat with Ethan on the porch. She looked at him, her gaze soft but resolute. "You know, Ethan," she said in her low, steady voice, "everything I've done wasn't just about revenge or even reclaiming justice for myself. I wanted to leave behind something greater, a legacy. So those who come after us can see that even when they're underestimated, they can still make a difference." Ethan took her hand in his. "And you've done just that, Naomi, not just for the people here, but for the entire world." Naomi smiled, but her eyes lingered on the horizon as though peering into the future. "Justice isn't always easy," she said, her words echoing into the night, "but it's always worth fighting for. And if the darkness returns, you know I'll be ready." In the tranquil Montana night, Naomi Carter, the ghost, was no longer just an agent, a wife, or a rancher. She had become part of something far greater, an eternal flame, ready to burn bright whenever the light of justice was threatened. The story of Naomi Carter, the ghost, is not just a tale of confronting darkness, but a testament to the power of resilience and faith in justice. From a dismissed wife to a living legend, Naomi inspired the belief that anyone, regardless of their starting point, could rise up and change the world. Now, what about you? Faced with the darkness, what will you do to keep the light of justice alive? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and share this story if it resonates with you, and subscribe to our channel to ensure you never miss another inspiring journey. See you on the next adventure.